Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm Peter Gross, the co-host of the original Wild Kingdom with Marlon Perkins and Jim Fowler. You know, throughout the years of filming Wild Kingdom, we were faced with the grim reality of extinction of some animal species. In the 60s and early 70s, animals were negatively impacted by the loss of habitat and the use of a chemical insecticide known as DDT. Today, DDT has been banned in the United States, and we've made great strides to preserve wide open spaces where animals can thrive. Wild Kingdom made a direct impact on modern captive breeding and release programs. We are now seeing a positive comeback for species like this red-tailed hawk. We must all do our part to continue this progress to protect all animals in the Wild Kingdom. So sit back and relax and enjoy Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom right here on RFD-TV.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom is presented by Mutual of Omaha, people you can count on.
Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. At the turn of the century, North America's largest and most magnificent species of waterfowl, the trumpeter swan, was believed to be extinct. Excessive shooting of these huge white water birds by trappers and hunters for their meat and feathers was largely responsible for their disappearance. Then, in the early 1930s, a small flock of 33 was discovered near Yellowstone National Park. Immediate steps were taken to preserve these birds, and the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge was established here in Montana, close to the Idaho border, at the base of the Centennial Mountains. The solitude and isolation make the refuge ideal for swans, and an important area for other waterfowl of the western flyways. Recently, I was invited to observe the continuing year-round study taking place to facilitate better management of the trumpeter swans. In doing so, I learned how man has saved the swans of Red Rock Lakes. The stark beauty and isolation of the mountains and valleys, muffled beneath the blanketing snow, create a wonderland of the 40,000 acres which make up the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. In the midst of the area is the refuge headquarters, where I've come to observe the swan program. Before leaving here, the personnel show me on a map where the swan winter feeding stations are located. Assistant Refuge Manager Ron Papike says without them, only a portion of the swans could survive winter. And Roger Page, wildlife biologist, concurs. The winter swan population, according to Refuge Manager Gene Stroops, remains close to the stations. Biologist Tyson Plants says our snow tractor is all ready, so we might as well be on our way. This rugged vehicle is the only reliable form of winter overland transportation here, where snows are often very deep and temperatures may drop to 30 degrees below zero for extended periods. Many of the predators hunt by daylight at this time of year, so it's no surprise when Roger Page points out one of them to me. It's a big bobcat who looks very heavy in his dense winter coat. He's seen something and is interested. It's a snowshoe hare, and the chase is on. His only hope is to head for dense cover. Well, that's one lucky hare. It's still a considerable distance to where the feeding station that we're heading for is located. And there's a good chance we'll see more of the refuge wildlife before arriving there. Few large animals remain here during the bitter winters. Deer, elk, and antelope all seek more protected areas. But we've sighted the one big animal which remains year-round, the moose. He's well adapted to cold and snow. In this area, the marsh waters are solidly frozen. Over to the left, an otter zips down a snowbank. Sliding's a common practice among otters, but often, if the slope isn't steep enough, he'll pump with his back end and slide the front. We're coming to the open water near the feeding area now, and we should be sighting some swans before long. Roger Page and I have seen them simultaneously, and a close look shows them to be both juvenile and adult trumpeter swans. The younger swans don't lose their gray coloration and become pure white until the second year. Often they rest on the ice near the open water, or on the higher portions of marsh ground, waiting for food. Roger of the University of Montana is in charge of the trumpeter swan research program here. We'll move on now. It's just a short distance ahead to where these swans are fed throughout the winter. There are 2 of these feeding stations in the refuge, close to waters which don't freeze because of warm springs under the surface. As we arrive, Roger points out that because they're so heavy-bodied, the trumpeters run to gather enough speed for takeoff. They do this whether taking off from ice, water, or ground. Once aloft, they're very powerful flyers. They're also extremely graceful and impressive in flight. Now we'll move out onto the feeding station's platform, where Refuge Manager Gene Stroops will begin the feeding operation, aided by Tyson Plants. The principal grain stored as swan feed at this feeding station is wheat. The spout from the silo is moved by the men, so the wheat hits the water in a semicircle and spreads out. Some floats on the surface, but much of it sinks and will later be eaten off the bottom by swans and ducks. One swan is already starting toward the newly dispersed wheat. It'll soon be joined by others. Soon after we dispersed the wheat, many swans and ducks came to feed at the station, and I learned why this winter feeding program is so important. It's satisfying to see how well the feeding program is working. As we move off, the trumpeter swans come to the feeding area without fear. The studies done here have proven that the winter swan populations fluctuate to some degree with the severity of the weather. The feed provided for the swans greatly improves their physiological condition and results not only in more birds surviving the rigorous winter, but in a higher reproduction rate next spring. Of course, numerous other waterfowl, such as these golden-eyed ducks, are quick to take advantage of the winter feeding program on the refuge. Although swans are generally fearful of men and machines, they quickly lose all fear of the feeding station. The warm springs allow a few acres of water to remain open despite frigid temperatures, and often as many as 300 swans will winter here instead of migrating to the south. Without the supplemental feeding, this area could only support about 20 swans over the winter. In addition to the trumpeter swans and golden eyes, mallard ducks often come and stay for the winter, and so do some hooded mergansers. Despite the severity of Montana winters, life is relatively easy for the swans which choose to remain. It's time now for us to head back to the refuge headquarters. Throughout the winter, the swans wing gracefully over Red Rock Lake's National Wildlife Refuge. Gradually, the seasons change. Suddenly, it's spring again, and the refuge is bright with flowers and new greenery. Now the mode of transportation over the vast marshy lakes is the airboat. Roger Page, continuing his studies, welcomes me back to the refuge for the spring nesting activities. Ear guards protect us from the roar of the powerful airplane engine which propels this craft. Ordinary outboard motorboats are impractical in these shallow, marshy lakes. The airboat combines maneuverability and speed for such waters. Part of the reason for the swans becoming nearly extinct years ago was the loss through encroachment by man of beautiful natural habitats like this. Now, having moved well into the marsh, we get a look at one of the swans that will soon be nesting here. There's a sense of exhilaration in experiencing a marshland spring, and an appreciation that far-sighted conservationists have set aside this magnificent area as a refuge for trumpeter swans and other birds. We are fortunate in that we have just sighted some of the most delightful birds to watch in early spring, western grebes. They're already building their floating nests,
And with our motor noise ended, it's possible these fascinating birds may perform some of their spectacular courtship activities for us. They've begun their characteristic water-walking exhibition. This is one of the most unusual sights in nature. Some of the grebes continue with their nest building, but the water-walking has become a contagion among others. Unfortunately, we don't have time to watch more. Roger wants to make a quick surveillance of the marsh to get an idea about when the swans are going to begin nesting activities. At this time of year, it's unusual to see a swan by itself out in the lake. Chances are this bird has a mate somewhere around, and if we can spot her, she may give us an indication of where her nest is located. There's the female bird now. We'll watch where she goes. She's headed into a marshy point, so there's where we'll check for the nest later on.
The swans built nests and laid their eggs, and soon it was time for the signets to emerge. That's when we took a close survey of the nests.
In the weeks of spring that have passed, the nesting activities of the trumpeters have peaked. In our travels by airboat over these thousands of acres of lake and marsh, we've encountered many nests and have recorded the egg data. Roger says hatching time is at hand now, and the current situation at the various nests is what concerns us. Almost without exception, the swans build their nests atop muskrat lodges and carefully cover their eggs when they leave. The nest platform easily supports a person. I'll record the data as Roger checks them over. He finds all 5 to be in good shape. 2 to 8 eggs are laid, but usually 5. This clutch will probably hatch in a day or 2. A new nest like this is built each year in the same area by the paired trumpeters who mate for life. Though only the female or pen incubates, the male or cob helps care for the young. It's a fair distance to the next nest, since the individual territory of a mated pair of swans is usually 40 acres. Now we're nearing another. This time, I'm given the opportunity to check out the situation in the nest. The incubation period averages 35 days, so these eggs will also be hatching very soon. All 7 look good, which is extremely lucky, since the refuge studies have shown that only 50 to 60% of the eggs will actually hatch. Some are destroyed by predators, or are simply infertile and don't develop. This looks like it will be a good year. There's another another nest some distance ahead in which there are eggs that Roger hopes will have hatched sometime during the past few days. We're carefully heading in toward that nest. Cygnets start swimming soon after hatching, so if our luck holds, the nest will be empty. No, this time we're not so lucky. It's disappointing to see an egg still here, but not unexpected. There's no way of knowing why one egg in an otherwise successful clutch should be infertile, but it frequently occurs. Roger's research may in time provide the answer. Shell bits indicate that the other 3 eggs that have been here have hatched, and the baby swans are probably watching us in grasses close by. Roger hopes they will survive to adulthood and become part of the permanent trumpeter swan population here at Red Rock Lakes. There's another nest Roger knows about not too far away, which had 4 eggs in it. He says we'll make it our final stop today. Perhaps by now the eggs will have hatched. There's the nest, and a number of cygnets are in it. There are 4 of them, so it's been a perfect hatching. They are the fulfillment of a dream, a realization that because of man, there will be no extinction of these fine birds. The cygnets of today are the promise of tomorrow, when they will be the swans of Red Rock Lakes.
As we've already seen, quite a great deal has been done to improve the lot of the magnificent trumpeter swan. Nevertheless, the work is not yet done. Research continues into the lives of these swans. New data is continually being accumulated, and better and more definitive steps are being taken to protect trumpeter swans as a part of our natural heritage. Next week, we'll see how the scientists connected with Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge keep close watch over every nest and egg and over each little cygnet which hatches. We'll also see how the adult birds are being safely captured, studied, banded, and released. In short, rather than being destructive, we'll see man actually working to save an important member of the wild kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha, people you can count on, has presented Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha, helping people find Medicare solutions for over 50 years. To learn more about plan options or how to protect your kingdom, contact us today.
Mutual of Omaha. Protect your kingdom.